everybody. You're here with your friends, Nancy and Susan, and today we're going to be talking about hearing loss.
We're actually doing this series called Coping and Living with Health Challenges. And we get so used to people talking about diseases, but we don't really talk about people who just have regular health challenges. The estimate that the World Health Organization has is that by 2050, nearly 2.5 billion people are projected to have some degree of hearing loss, and about 700 million will require hearing rehabilitation. Currently, 5% of the world's population, that's 430 million people, require rehabilitation to address their disabling hearing loss. Of that 430 million people, 34 million are children. So about 28.8 million US adults could benefit from using hearing aids. But Nancy, do you want to guess how many people are actually using them?
Maybe 10%.
1 in 3.
Oh my gosh.
It goes undiagnosed. Often, the first signs of hearing loss is just people yelling at you because they accuse you that you're not hearing. And you think it's a communication problem, but it could be as simple as getting the right diagnosis for your physical hearing loss issues. And so we're doing this program because we want to shine the light on this. We want people to stop digging into your old patterns, challenge yourself, listen to this, and go explore. See if this is something that is affecting you. Nancy, we have an amazing guest who has a personalized story to tell, and we want to listen to her. And can you just tell us who that is today?
Yeah, so today we're going to be speaking with a friend of ours that we've known since college. Her name is Jenny Carrick. So welcome, Jenny.
Thank you.
Jenny is the Marketing and Communications Director for Enrollment Management and Undergraduate Education at University of California at Davis. And she has so many things to share with us because hearing loss has been a part of her life. So Susan just shared some really staggering statistics. If we were to do a Venn diagram, every single one of us in this country and around the world is affected by someone or themselves having hearing loss. You fall in that group as well. And so I was just wondering, when did you discover you had a hearing loss, and how did this all start for you?
I think the early suspicions were when I was a child in first grade, and I had some problems when I was learning to read. Not learning to read itself, but when I would read out loud, I had some pronunciation issues. And at that point, there was quite a bit of testing done, and it was concluded that I needed speech therapy. It wasn't until I was in my 40s, at my family's urging, that I did get my hearing checked. That's when they found I have a uh, hearing loss. And I have an interesting pattern of hearing loss where my low and high decibel ranges I hear pretty close to normal. And it's in my middle ranges where my loss is diagnosed at moderate to severe. And the human voice is right in that mid range area.
Whether you find that you have hearing loss or not, getting the truth and getting the accurate information is always a good place to start. So if you suspect, listeners, that you might have a hearing problem on any level, even if it's tones, maybe you hear everything else just fine, but when your spouse talks to you, you can't hear the person. So it's worth getting checked just to make sure.
So I went through and got the hearing aids, which was a journey in and of itself, because I'm fortunate in that I do have some employer covered insurance for hearing aids, which is not usual. And so I had to find, of course, the right networked hearing aid center to go to, and all of that. And hearing aids, there's many different types of hearing aids, many different technological thing every year. And then when I first wore them, it was the only thing I can really compare it to. It's not like getting eyeglasses. It's not like putting on a pair of glasses and saying, oh, wow, I can see detail in things I couldn't see before. It's not that level of overwhelming. It's really exciting. With noise bombarding you that you couldn't hear, it is extremely overwhelming. And they actually increase the strength of the hearing aid to reach the optimal level over a period of time because of that sense of overwhelming. But it was those first few weeks where it was really little things that I noticed that I was like, wow, I didn't realize I couldn't hear these things. Taking the dog for a walk, and we walked by a little creek bed and hearing frogs. I never knew there were frogs in that creek bed. Or we have a little preserved nature area near us where we, in the spring, there are coyote pups that will, yip and yap and howl a bit at night. And my husband kept telling me there were coyotes, and I flat out did not believe him because I couldn't hear them. I can hear them now. I can't even really describe how incredible it was, and how I was so happy to be living in this age where I had access to this type of technology, and it made my life, it improved my life, and that I wanted to take it to the next level and learn more and more about it. At the same time, I also learned more about my hearing loss condition, and so I was more consumed than ever to ensure that I could protect my ability to hear where it was, and that I could have 100% word recognition, which is an important part of hearing. Because once you start to lose the ability to understand what is being spoken to you, that language is lost forever and cannot come back.
That is really fascinating because now I'm starting to think about when one starts to lose connection with their community and they're not able to hear or participate in the conversation, that leads to isolation. And as we get older, that also is a contributing factor for other conditions that can lead to cognitive decline and such. You had mentioned something about that earlier.
There's been significant studies done. In fact, the Phonak, a hearing aid company, recently released a study that continues to explore the link between hearing, language loss, and dementia. And there is definitely a link. And those who have significant hearing loss are much more at risk of developing dementia. And I certainly don't want that to happen.
I don't want that to happen to you or anyone like either. So, Jenny, what would you recommend people do to, first of all, figure this out?
I would recommend that if a parent has clues or indications that their child has a hearing problem, get them into a pediatrician and get the testing started and demand an audiologist test. For those who are adults or young adults, protect your hearing. And then, of course, um, do the same thing. I really want to encourage, especially people in our age category, that the sooner you detect that hearing loss, you can't recover what you've already lost, especially with hearing loss of the type that I have, and I think it's called sensorial. I'm always wrong on those types. But once those little hair fibers in the ears and in the ear canal are lost, there's no regenerating them. You can't recover that hearing loss. But if you're using some sort of rehabilitative method, mainly being hearing aids, then the rest of those fibers are still being engaged and activated. So you can, first of all, slow down the progression of hearing loss, but also you can retain all of your ability to understand speech. And that's a really important thing.
You mentioned hearing protection. So I've always had sensitive hearing. And I think also because of the environment that we work in now, so many locations have these open environments where there's no sound dampening in ceiling tiles. I think our environments are extremely noisy. I used to be in the army, and when I was in the military police corps, we were around a lot of like with loud noises. It was concussive, and so it was sharp and it was dramatic. And because of that, just being aware, I've always been careful. And even if I go to a concert, I wear earplugs. I can still
Mhm.
hear music. It's just not. I don't
Right.
suffer from that really loud, sustained amount of noise. What kind of hearing protection do you use and precautions do you take now that you know that you have this loss and you want to maintain your hearing level?
I know your kids are grown, but do you talk with them about this, how they can prevent their own hearing loss?
Because my hearing loss may be genetic, or it could be because I had RSV as a toddler, and ran a high fever for several days. But because of my hearing loss pattern, it's definitely not age related. It's definitely caused by either illness or genetic or a combination of the two. And because of that, I have constantly talk to my children about it. My son has already noted that he's having some difficulty hearing in certain environments, and he's going to go get his checked out. I definitely tell them to do that. My husband's a sound engineer, and he does sound for live music. And so he's very well aware of the ranges that are healthy for the ear and what to set his ranges at. And I'm sure this won't come as a shock to either of you that a lot of places that concerts and other live music venues are producing music way beyond the safety threshold.
Yeah.
So if you're going to be in that environment, there's so many devices on your phone where you can check the decibel range. And if you're above 100, you need hearing protection. Lucky for me, there's a ear mold in my hearing aid that affords me a certain level of protection, similar to little silicone, little, plugs that you put in your ears. And my hearing aids automatically dampen if I were to go, in my case, above 90 decibels. There is a dampening effect that happens. Should I ever be in an environment with extreme noise, I would definitely wear headphones, a protective type of headphones.
I have a couple of apps that I just Googled right now just to give our listeners some options. We don't recommend or promote any of these, but you should check them out if it could be an option for you to just quietly figure out whether you're in a safe environment for your ears or not. One of them is called Decibel X, another is called Hearing Helper, another is called MD Hearing, and then another one is called NIOSH Sound Level Meter. That's NIOSH. So do a search of your own or check out one of those apps. It takes 2 seconds. We all have apps on our phones. Just open it up. To any venue operators who are out there, we urge you to not try to build excitement in your venue by making things so loud. You can build excitement in other ways, which is more authentic. So, better music mixes. If you've got a DJ or all of those other things, be aware of that. Your patrons will have a much better time if the quality is good and they can interact with people in a more authentic way. So that's our little PSA to all the venue owners out there, restaurants, bars, everybody.
Once you learned about your hearing loss and then you got some hearing aids that worked for you, what were the things that you were able to use and apply at work that help you work at your best efficiency level?
When I first started wearing hearing aids, before I had this Bluetooth technology, in my work environment, when we had large meetings, we were usually in a lecture room or a lecture hall or in some sort of space. I learned very quickly to raise my hand and say, please use a microphone.
What is it about the microphone that makes them hear better?
It amplifies the sound, and so it helps carry it to your ear. And when you're in certain rooms that microphones are supposed to be used because they've got certain sound dampening features to make the sound flat and not echo and carry.
At what point does American Sign Language, ASL, come into play? And is that something you're open to, or is that also a personalized solution for people?
It's certainly something I'm open to, learning and preparing for a possible point in my life where I'm unable to communicate through the spoken word. Because I'm doing everything I can to protect my hearing, what I've got left of it, and I'm activating the hearing that I do have, it's unlikely that I will ever be profoundly deaf. And it's also unlikely that I'll lose my ability to understand the spoken word because I have 100% retention, and my goal is to keep that as close to 100%. as possible. But I'm interested in learning American Sign Language just because I think communication is so important and it really is just another language.
I do a lot of work in public music education. So I'm at concerts a lot. I always use the microphone when I'm speaking to the audience. But now I'm just going to be much more aware of that situation. And also when I hold meetings, I think what I'm going to do is ask people like, hey, if you need to sit a little closer, figure out where you need to be, and being a little more inclusive and just aware of those conditions.
If somebody's in a wheelchair with no legs, you don't hold the meeting in a building where there's no wheelchair access because they can't get to the meeting, right? If the halls and hallways are too narrow for them to get their wheelchair through, there's simple things that you can do to give people dignity, even if it's most of these accommodations are very small, you know?
They really are.
So calling it an accommodation where you have to make sweeping changes in the way that you do your work because someone else has an issue, that's not what we're talking about here.
Jenny, thank you for sharing all of this information with us and your experience. I have a whole new understanding of what to think about and consider when one for like planning meetings or events, and just how providing something such as these small accommodations or technology assistance can really help the entire audience and that we weren't aware of.
Thank you both. It was a pleasure to be here.